November 20. There's nothing left to bloom or sprout or bud or grow. These showers will not bring you flowers at all. These showers are practice for snow. Think poetry is too difficult for young children? Think again. I'm Nicole Phyllis Fravel, and this is Wildwood Teaching. And today I am on a mission to convince you that poetry, in particular, poetry about nature, is the perfect medium for preschoolers. I'll share some ideas for introducing poetry in early childhood settings. And then I'm going to give you a list of some of my favorite poetry anthologies to have available in your classroom. We tend to think of poetry as something mysterious and difficult, and therefore we might avoid it in preschool. Or we stick to the humorous poems of, say, Shel Silverstein or Jack Perlutsky, and ignore more serious adult poems. Now, I love Shel Silverstein and Jack Perlutsky. They're fabulous. Definitely use them in your classroom. I'm just saying, don't stop there. Poetry, in particular, poetry about the natural world, is perfectly suited to preschoolers. And poems are meant to be read aloud. And they're perfect for children who love to play around with the sounds of our language, right? You have rhyming in poems, you have alliteration, you are tapping into phonological awareness that we want children to be attuned to in order to develop that emergent literacy. And poems are often short, the one I just read to you at the beginning, which is perfect for young children who need their literature in small bites, who might find it challenging to listen to longer stories. Poems are meant to evoke feelings, right? Perfect for the young children who are just trying to understand their own emotions. And poems are steeped in imagery, so they're encouraging children to observe and connect to the world around them. And in fact, Tim Rabinsky, who was a professor of education at Kent State, outlines a number of reasons why poetry is essential to reading development in an article that you can access called The Poetry in the Age of the Science of Reading. And he includes the phonemic and phonological awareness that I already mentioned, but adds to the list fluency. Because poems are often repeated over and over again, they're short enough to be memorized. They offer a chance for children to practice their fluency with language. They offer a chance for children to hear and practice new vocabulary. And they have a built-in structure and for easily writing, or in young children's case, if they're dictating it to you, concocting and constructing their own pieces of short literature, short poems. So if you think about it, for example, the many different ways that you can encourage children to alter a rhyme, right? We all know the nursery rhyme, hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. Right? You can encourage your children to turn that into anything, any animal with any sort of instrument. So, hey, mum, the cat and the drum. Or, hey, dar, the cow drives the car. Right? And they're silly and the children latch onto it, but you have that structure already built for you. So you've got a starting point. And so, yes, please include reading and creating poems in your daily preschool routines. So attached to this video, I have a PDF that and just gives you some ideas, some ways that we explore poetry here at Wildwood Teaching, some concrete ideas that you can use. I'm going to go over some of them right now in this video. So one things that I like to do when I introduce poems to children is I like to encourage them to close their eyes and make a brain picture. So can they see something inside their brains as I am reading the poem, right? And there's no real right or wrong here. What I'm doing is allowing them to practice a comprehension strategy that they can then translate to other things, right? Can you turn the words into pictures in your brain as a way of actively processing this information that's coming in? Another way of doing a comprehension strategy is turning the poetry into another form of art. So, sometimes we bring out the watercolors and paper and encourage children, go ahead and make pictures. Now, they don't have to be representative pictures. Some children will do representative pictures, but it might just be what feelings. Is it smooth? Are they jagged lines? What colors are coming up as you're feeling the poem? If you do this, what I suggest is that you read the poem the whole way through at least once before children pick up their art materials. And then as the children are creating their art, read the poem another 2 or 3 times just as they're creating the art. Another way of processing it, another comprehension strategy, is to act out a poem, right? Movement helps children understand meaning. So you could do an impromptu reader's theater to the poem. And by that, I mean, we haven't prepped anything ahead of time. We have no or minimal props, and the children are just getting up and acting out what they are hearing the poem say. You could turn it into an interpretive dance. You could do some yoga to it, right? Puppets. Puppets work as well. Can the puppets act out the poems? What you do is going to match whether it's a narrative poem, a lyrical poem, right? Lyrical poems more suited to dance, narrative poems more suited to your reader's theater. Sing it, right? We all know that songs are often poetry put to music. You've got rhythm, you've got rhyme, you've got alliteration. So start encouraging the children to play with the words. Set your favorite nursery rhymes and poems to your favorite tunes. See how it works. Make up silly rhymes to rhyming songs to match your daily routines. Extend familiar songs like Down by the Bay by making up your own new rhyming things. So I'll often say to the children, okay, we did the song. What other animals might be doing silly things? Well, I could have a snake eating a cake. And then we just make it up. Down by the bay where the watermelons grow. Back to my home, I dare not go. For if I do, my mother will say, did you ever see a snake eating a cake? Right? You can do this with so many rhyming children's songs. And then really do have a time where you are encouraging your children to write, to create poems, right? You could generate a list of descriptive words using all of your senses about something, anything, right? The pumpkin that you had at Halloween, right? How many descriptive words can you come up with? List them, put them together in a poem. You could create a color poem by listing everything that is orange, because I'm on a pumpkin theme now, right? So orange, well, how many things can you come up with orange? Orange is the fruit that squirts when I bite it. Orange is the jack-o'-lantern that sits on my porch, right? And if you just list them, you've come up with a poem. You can adapt that, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 calming technique, right? Where you have 5 things, you name 5 things that you see, 4 things that you can touch, but do it about a place, right? We're going to write the school poem. What are 5 things we can see in our school? I see What are 4 things we can touch? And what sense do they evoke? How do they feel? Right? All right, so now that you've got some ideas for interacting with poetry with children, I'm going to go into some anthologies that you might want to use to find those poems. I definitely recommend the Poetry for Young People series. It's a whole series where they take adult poems, right, and they go through that adult's body of work, and they've already pulled out poems that are good for young children, so you don't have to do the work of searching. Another good one is a year of nature poems, right, which is basically just one poem per month, and it totally evokes the nature. Because it is seasonal, right? What is a poem that would be typical for January, right? Another series where they have nature poems is, fortunately, I don't see it here, but oh, here it is. Sorry. It was the one that I read from in the beginning. When green becomes tomatoes. And I have to say that this is one of my current favorites because the poems come out kind of like short diary entries. So they are arranged by the year. But you can see it says June 10th, right? And they write something. And then June 15th, and it's a short entry, so short diary entry poems. And I love that. I feel like they really tap into a child's perspective. Another good one is Swirl by Swirl, and it is basically a book-length single poem in picture book form, but every page has labeled pieces of nature where you can see spirals and swirls. Another one I recommend is National Geographic's Book of Nature Poems. Now, a lot of these poems, I'm going to be honest, are a bit too difficult for preschoolers, but there are 200 of them in the book. And you can see I've just used my library tag to mark one of the poems that I thought was very accessible to young children. But what's fabulous about these is you have the National Geographic nature photographs attached to each of the poems. You know, I like my nonfiction, right? I always include in my anthologies roundups and nonfiction, and Winter Bees and Other Poems of the Cold, where you have each poem is actually paired with a narrative paragraph about whatever animal or a natural phenomenon that they've talked about with snowflakes in the poems. And what I recommend if you're doing this is I recommend reading the informative paragraph first to the children, and then reading the poem and having the children pretend to be that animal or that phenomenon as they comprehend the poem. And the last one I have is Insectopedia. And these poems are short, accessible, and they are often fun visual shape poems. So, for example, this one is about the ants marching. And when they say left, right, you can see the words marching along the page. Or this one about an inchworm, right? So you have the shape of that inchworm, right? Humping and then stretching, humping and then stretching along the page, which is just another fun way for children to play around with words. Every book that I mentioned is in an attachment with this video. So there's 2 attachments. There's one that is a PDF guide to using poetry with young children. And the second one is just a list of where you can get books to find poetry. So I hope you will start introducing poetry to your children, or if you already do, that you will find some of these ideas useful and introducing children to nature poems. And then join us here next week for another episode of Wildwood Teaching. I will see you there.